The flames caught on the white satin corner first. I watched as the fire slowly consumed the embossed gold lettering that read, Richard and Lorraine, June 15th, 1998. 25 years of lies, burning in my backyard fire pit on a Tuesday afternoon in Spokane, Washington. The photographs curled and blackened, my smile in that ivory dress, his hand on my waist, both of us cutting that 3-tier cake, all of it turning to ash. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, peeked over the fence. "Lorraine, everything okay over there?" I didn't answer. I just fed another page to the flames. There we were at the reception, dancing to At Last by Etta James. I remember thinking that night that I'd finally found my person. At 43 years old, I'd given up on marriage. And then Rick walked into the public library where I worked, asking for help finding books on woodworking. And 6 months later, I was walking down the aisle. The detectives folder sat on the patio table next to me. Manila. Ordinary. The kind of thing that should hold tax returns or medical records. Instead, it held photographs of my husband with another woman, his other wife, Sandra, and their 2 adult children. A whole other family, living in Boise, Idaho, just 5 hours away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. How a 68-year-old librarian ended up burning her wedding album on a random Tuesday, with the smell of smoke mixing with the scent of the lilacs I'd planted on our 10th anniversary. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something. If you're watching this, if you've clicked on this video, maybe you're looking for a sign. Maybe something doesn't feel right in your own life. Maybe you've been ignoring that small voice that whispers, "Something's wrong," when you're lying awake at 3 a.m. I ignored that voice for 25 years. But here's what I want you to know. This channel, these stories I'm sharing, they're completely free. No paywalls, no premium content. Just real stories from real women who learned hard lessons and want to help others avoid the same pain. We're building something here, a community of women who refuse to be silent about what happened to them. If this story resonates with you, if you think someone else needs to hear it, I'm asking you to do 3 quick things that take literally 2 seconds, but make a massive difference. First, hit that subscribe button and click the little bell icon. That way you won't miss the next story. And trust me, each one has its own powerful message. Second, tap that like button. I know it seems small, but that one click tells YouTube to show this video to more women who might need to hear it. And third, drop a comment below. Tell me what you think, what city or country you're watching from, or just say hello. When you comment, you're not just helping the algorithm. You're building this community with me. Every single subscription, every like, every comment helps this channel grow and reach more people. More women who need to know they're not alone, that it's never too late to take control of their lives. Your support means everything. And together, we're creating something powerful. All right, let me take you back to where this all started. I grew up in Spokane, born in 1955, the middle child of 5 kids. My father, Harold Miller, worked at Kaiser Aluminum for 37 years, and my mother, Dorothy, stayed home with us until the youngest started school, then took a job at Woolworth's downtown. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on the South Hill, the kind with a single bathroom that all 7 of us shared, thin walls where you could hear everything, and a kitchen that always smelled like my mother's pot roast on Sundays. Money was tight but steady. We weren't poor, but we knew the value of $1. My mother darned our socks until they were more darning than sock. My father brought home his lunch pail every day with the same routine, washing it out in the kitchen sink, setting it by the back door for the next morning. They divorced when I was 16. which was unusual for our Catholic neighborhood in 1971. I never knew exactly why. They didn't explain things to children back then, but I remember my mother's face getting harder, her mouth forming a thin line whenever my father's name was mentioned. After the divorce, things got tighter. My mother moved us to a smaller rental house on the east side, near Gonzaga University. She took on a second job cleaning offices at night. I remember her hands always smelled like pine sol, and her back always hurt. She'd come home at 11 at night and still get up at 6 to make us breakfast before school. I learned early that marriage wasn't a fairy tale. I watched my older sister Margaret rush into marriage at 19 to escape our cramped house, only to end up divorced with 2 kids by 25. My younger sister Susan married her high school sweetheart and seemed happy. But I saw the way she had to ask permission to visit us, the way her husband Jim controlled the money, decided where they'd live, when they'd have children. So I focused on other things. I went to community college, got my associate degree, then worked my way through my bachelor's in library science at Eastern Washington University in Cheney. It took me 7 years because I could only afford part-time enrollment while working full-time at a grocery store. I graduated when I was 28, got a job at the Spokane Public Library downtown, and threw myself into work. I dated, of course. There was Dennis in my 30s, a teacher who wanted to move to Alaska. There was Paul in my late 30s who kept saying he wasn't ready for commitment and then married someone else 6 months after we broke up. By the time I turned 40, I'd made peace with being single. I had my little apartment on Monroe Street, my cat Fitzgerald, my routines. I volunteered at the women's shelter on weekends, had dinner with my book club every Thursday, visited my mother every Sunday. The library became my life. I loved it there. The smell of books, the quiet rustle of pages, helping people find exactly the story they needed. I specialized in the local history section, knew every family genealogy, every old newspaper archive. People would come in looking for information about their great-grandparents who'd homesteaded in the area, and I'd spend hours helping them piece together their family stories. That's what I was doing the day Rick Thompson walked into my life. It was a Wednesday in November 1997. I remember because it was the week before Thanksgiving, and we had our annual book sale going on in the lobby. He came up to my desk in the reference section, this tall man with silver hair and kind blue eyes, wearing a flannel shirt and work jeans that had sawdust on them. He had these strong, capable hands, and when he smiled, little crinkles formed at the corners of his eyes. "Excuse me," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm looking for books on furniture making. Traditional techniques, not the modern stuff." I showed him to the crafts section, pulled down several books on woodworking, furniture design, joinery techniques. He stood close enough that I could smell sawdust and something else. Old Spice, I'd later learn. We got to talking. He told me he'd just moved to Spokane from Seattle, that he'd taken early retirement from Boeing at 55 and wanted to start a small furniture-making business. He'd bought a house with a big garage that he was converting into a workshop. "I've always wanted to work with my hands," he said, holding up one of the books I'd recommended, examining the dovetailed joint diagram on the cover. "Spent 30 years engineering airplane parts, and now I want to make things people can actually use in their homes. Kitchen tables, rocking chairs, hope chests, the kind of furniture that gets passed down." We talked for almost an hour that day. He checked out 6 books. Before he left, he asked if the library had any programs or classes on woodworking. "Not currently," I told him, "but we're always looking for community members willing to teach workshops." He smiled that crinkly-eyed smile. "Well, give me 6 months to learn what I'm doing, and maybe I'll come back and offer one." He did come back. Not in 6 months. In 2 weeks. He returned the books, checked out 6 more, and asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. I almost said no. I was 43 years old, set in my ways, comfortable in my single life. But something about Rick felt different. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't trying too hard. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, asked questions about my work, my interests, my life. So I said yes. We had our first coffee date at the Rocket Bakery on Main. He told me about his life. Born and raised in Tacoma, moved to Seattle for the Boeing job, married young to his high school girlfriend, who died of cancer 15 years ago. No children because they'd kept putting it off and then it was too late. He'd spent the last decade and a half alone, focusing on work. And when the early retirement package came up, he decided it was time for a change. I wanted somewhere smaller than Seattle, he explained, stirring cream into his coffee. Somewhere with 4 real seasons, where people still know their neighbors. Spokane seemed perfect. I told him about my family, my work, my love of local history. We discovered we both loved old movies, the classic ones from the 40s and 50s. We both preferred real books to the newfangled e-readers that were just starting to appear. We both liked quiet evenings better than loud parties. That first coffee date turned into dinner the next week, then a movie, then regular Wednesday night dinners that became a standing date. Rick was attentive in a way I'd never experienced. He remembered small things I mentioned. That I loved daffodils. That my favorite meal was my mother's lasagna. That I was allergic to cats, but had Fitzgerald anyway because I couldn't resist his little face at the shelter. For Valentine's Day, he showed up at my apartment with a bouquet of daffodils, in February, which must have cost him a fortune, and asked if he could cook me dinner. He made lasagna from scratch, following his late wife's recipe but adjusting it based on details I'd mentioned about my mother's version. It was thoughtful. It was sweet. It made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt since. Well, maybe ever. By spring, we were spending most of our free time together. He'd take me to his workshop and show me the projects he was working on. A cherry wood bookshelf, a maple dining table, a walnut jewelry box. His hands moved with such confidence over the wood, and I loved watching him work. He was building a life here in Spokane, and he seemed to want me to be part of it. In May, just 6 months after we met, he proposed. We were having a picnic at Manito Park, sitting near the duck pond, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. He got down on one knee right there on the grass and pulled out a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Lorraine," he said, and his voice shook slightly. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you're used to being independent, but I've never felt this way before, not even with Emily. You make me want to be better. You make me excited about the future. Would you marry me?" I should have said no. I should have said it was too fast, that we needed more time. But I was 43 years old, and I'd convinced myself my chance at marriage had passed. Here was this kind, gentle man offering me everything I'd told myself I didn't need. And maybe I was lonely. Maybe I was tired of going home to an empty apartment. Maybe I wanted what my younger sister had, what I saw in other women my age. A partner, someone to share the load. So I said yes. We got married 6 weeks later, on June 15th, 1998, at a small ceremony at the Davenport Hotel downtown. My mother was there, looking frail but happy. My sisters came with their families, a few friends from the library. Rick didn't have much family. His parents were dead. He was an only child. Most of his friends were still in Seattle and couldn't make the trip on short notice. His witness was Bob Hendricks, his new next-door neighbor. A guy he'd gotten friendly with over backyard fence conversations about power tools and lawn care. The wedding was simple but lovely. I wore an ivory dress I'd found at Nordstrom Rack. Rick wore a navy suit. We exchanged vows in the hotel's Hall of Doges, with its ornate Spanish Renaissance architecture and crystal chandeliers. The photographer, my sister's friend who did it as a wedding gift, took dozens of photos. Us cutting the cake, our first dance, me laughing at something Rick whispered in my ear. All those images that would later burn in my fire pit. After a weekend honeymoon at a bed and breakfast in Leavenworth, we couldn't afford more time off. We moved into Rick's house on the north side. It was a nice 3-bedroom rambler built in the 70s, with that big garage he'd converted into his workshop. He'd already set up one of the bedrooms as an office for me, with built-in bookshelves he'd made himself. "I want you to feel at home here," he said as he showed me around that first day as his wife. "This is our house now, your house." And for a while I did feel at home. The first year of marriage was good, better than good. Rick was attentive, affectionate, considerate. He'd leave little notes for me. "Gone to the hardware store, back by noon, love you." Stuck to the bathroom mirror with a smiley face drawn at the bottom. He'd make coffee before I woke up, would have a hot cup waiting for me when I shuffled into the kitchen at 6:30 every morning. On my birthday that first year, he surprised me with a handmade oak bookshelf, perfectly fitted to the wall in my office, with my initials carved discreetly in the back panel. We fell into comfortable routines. I'd work at the library Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. He'd spend his days in the workshop building furniture on commission. Word was spreading about his craftsmanship, and he was getting steady work. We'd have dinner together every night, taking turns cooking. Tuesdays were my book club nights. Thursdays he had poker with Bob and some other guys from the neighborhood. Weekends we'd often drive out to the mountains, hiking the trails around Mount Spokane or just driving through the small towns, stopping at antique stores and local diners. He was a good husband by all accounts. He didn't drink to excess, just a beer or two with dinner sometimes. He didn't stay out late or come home smelling of perfume. He didn't yell or belittle or control. He was just there, steady, reliable, present. Or so I thought. The second year I started noticing small things. Nothing alarming, just little inconsistencies that didn't quite add up. In retrospect, these were the cracks in the facade, but at the time, I rationalized every single one. It started with the phone calls. This was 1999, before cell phones were ubiquitous. We had a landline in the kitchen and one in our bedroom. Sometimes the phone would ring, and Rick would answer it quickly, almost too quickly, and take it into his workshop, closing the door. When I asked who it was, he'd say it was a client or a supplier or his accountant. Always had a reasonable explanation. One time I picked up the bedroom phone the same moment he picked up the kitchen phone. Before I could say anything, I heard a woman's voice say, "Rick, are you alone?" I hung up quietly, my heart suddenly pounding. When he came upstairs 20 minutes later, I asked who'd called. "Supplier from Portland," he said easily. "They've got some black walnut I wanted, but the price is steep. Trying to negotiate." I told myself I was being paranoid. Of course his suppliers might be women. This was the 90s. Women worked in every industry. There was nothing sinister about a female supplier asking if he was alone. Maybe she wanted to discuss pricing without someone else listening. Maybe she was asking if he was alone in his workshop, because workshops could be noisy. I created a dozen innocent explanations. Then there were the trips. Rick would occasionally need to go out of town for supplies or to deliver furniture. Once a month, sometimes twice. He'd leave Thursday evening, come back Saturday afternoon. Always had logical reasons. A client in Seattle wanted a custom dining set, needed to take measurements. A specialty lumber supplier in Portland had a sale. A furniture show in Boise where he could network. Boise. He went to Boise a lot. There's a great hardwood supplier there, he'd explain. Better prices than anything in Spokane. And the quality is superior. For the big jobs, it's worth the drive. I never questioned it. Why would I? He always came home with receipts, with pictures of the furniture he'd delivered, with business cards from the suppliers he'd met. He'd show me photos on his digital camera, him standing in front of a lumber yard, him loading wood into the truck, him shaking hands with a client. Looking back now, I realize I never appeared in any of those photos. If he was traveling to meet clients or suppliers, why didn't he ever invite me along? But at the time, I just figured he was working. It was business. I had my own job. I couldn't just take off for random road trips every month. The money was another thing. Rick handled our finances. He said he had a head for numbers, had managed his own retirement accounts. I gave him my paychecks to deposit and he paid all the bills. We had enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. My salary from the library wasn't huge, and his furniture business was still building. When I asked about retirement accounts or savings, he'd show me statements that looked legitimate. Everything seemed fine. But sometimes there'd be large withdrawals I didn't understand. New equipment for the shop, he'd explain. Or had to replace the truck's transmission. Or paid estimated taxes. Always reasonable, always explained. I'd nod and go back to my book or my work, trusting him completely. There were the holidays, too. Rick was never available for major holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving, even my birthday sometimes. He'd have a last-minute delivery or an emergency repair or a client crisis that required his immediate attention. The first time it happened was Thanksgiving 1999, our second year of marriage. "I'm so sorry, Lorraine," he said that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, looking genuinely apologetic. "The Hendersons in Seattle. Their dining table got damaged in transit, and they're hosting Thanksgiving dinner for 20 people. They're desperate. I need to drive up tomorrow, fix it, finish the repairs Friday, drive back Saturday." "Can't it wait until after the holiday?" I asked, disappointed. My whole family was gathering at Susan's house, and I'd been looking forward to introducing Rick to my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins he hadn't met yet. "Their whole family is coming," he said, taking my hands in his. "I can't leave them without a dining table for Thanksgiving. What kind of businessman would I be?" So I went to Susan's without him, made excuses for his absence, smiled through my disappointment. He came home Saturday with a bonus check from the grateful Hendersons and a bouquet of flowers for me. "Next year," he promised. "Next year I'll block out the whole holiday season, no work allowed." But next year came and went, and there was always something, a rush order, an emergency, a can't-miss opportunity. I'd go to family gatherings alone, making the same excuses, watching my sister's eyes fill with that particular kind of pity reserved for women whose husbands never show up. "Is everything okay with you two?" Margaret asked once, pulling me aside at my mother's 75th birthday party. Another event Rick had missed, due to a client emergency in Portland. "Everything's fine," I insisted. "He's just busy with the business. You know how it is when you're self-employed." She gave me that look, the one that said she didn't believe me but wasn't going to push. "Okay. But you know you can talk to me, right, if anything's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said firmly. And I believed it. I had to believe it, because the alternative was too frightening to consider. Then there was the day I found the receipt. It was tucked into the pocket of Rick's jeans, which I'd grabbed from the bedroom floor to throw in the wash. A small slip of paper from a restaurant in Boise called the Cottonwood Grill. The date was from one of his supply trips. The receipt showed dinner for two entrees, 2 glasses of wine, a shared dessert. The total was $87, expensive for 2002. My hands shook as I held that receipt. Dinner for 2. Who had he eaten with? A client? A supplier? But why would he wine and dine a supplier? And why had he never mentioned having dinner with anyone? He'd told me that trip was a quick in and out. Drive down Friday morning, pick up lumber, drive home Friday night. I stood there in our laundry room for 10 minutes, just staring at that piece of paper, my mind racing through possibilities. Then Rick called out from the living room, asking if I'd seen his reading glasses, and I made a split-second decision. I tucked the receipt back into the jeans pocket and threw them in the wash. Let it dissolve into nothing. Erase the evidence. Forget I ever saw it. "Coming," I called back, my voice only slightly shaky. "They're on the coffee table." I told myself he'd probably just met up with an old Boeing colleague who lived in Boise now. Or maybe a new client had taken him to dinner to discuss a big project. There were 1,000 innocent explanations, and asking about it felt like accusing him of something, which made me the suspicious, paranoid wife. I didn't want to be that woman, so I said nothing. The years passed. I pushed down every small doubt, every tiny inconsistency, every moment of unease. We celebrated our 5th anniversary, our 10th. Life continued in its comfortable routine. Rick's business thrived. My career at the library progressed. I became head of the reference department. We took a vacation to Victoria, British Columbia for our 10th anniversary. We bought a new car. We refinanced the house. We talked about my eventual retirement, about traveling more, about all the time we'd have together. And through it all, I ignored the signs. I told myself I was lucky. Lucky to have found love at 43. Lucky to have a husband who was faithful and kind and present. Lucky to have this comfortable life. I looked at my friends who were divorced or widowed or stuck in obviously unhappy marriages, and I counted my blessings. I had Rick. I had our home. I had our life together. What I didn't have was the truth. The shift started in our 15th year of marriage. Small changes that accumulated like dust in corners you don't clean often enough. Rick became more protective of his phone, not the landline. By 2013, we both had cell phones, those smartphones everyone was carrying. He'd changed with the times, bought an iPhone, taught himself how to use it. He was always good with technology, had that engineer's mind that could figure out any system. But he'd started keeping his phone face down on the table. He'd take it with him to the bathroom. If a text came in while we were sitting together, he'd glance at it, then quickly put the phone away without responding. "I'll handle it later," he'd say when I looked at him curiously. "Nothing important." One evening while Rick was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop. It was just sitting there and the screen lit up with a text preview. The contact name was Pete B. And the message read, "Missing you. When are you coming back?" Pete B. I didn't know any Pete. Rick had never mentioned a Pete. And missing you? That seemed like odd phrasing between business associates. But maybe Pete was short for Petra, or Petala. Maybe it was a female client who'd become a friend. Or maybe Pete was just an affectionate kind of guy. Some men were like that. When Rick came out of the shower, toweling his hair, I said casually, "Your phone buzzed. Someone named Pete B?" His hand paused mid-towel, just for a second. Then he continued drying his hair, his voice completely normal. "Oh yeah, Pete's that guy from the Woodworkers Guild in Boise. Great guy. We grab lunch when I'm down there. I'll text him back later. The Woodworkers Guild? I didn't know you joined one." "Yeah, a couple years ago. Didn't I mention it? It's casual. Just a bunch of guys who get together and talk shop, share techniques. Nothing formal." He probably had mentioned it and I'd forgotten. That's what I told myself. I forgot things all the time these days. Names, dates, where I'd put my car keys. I was 60 years old. My memory wasn't what it used to be. Then there was the weight loss. Around 2015, Rick started losing weight. Not dramatically, just gradually. He'd always been a solid guy, carried an extra 20 pounds or so around his middle. But over the course of a year, he slimmed down. His face looked younger, less jowly. His clothes hung looser. "You're looking good," I told him one morning as he got dressed. "Have you been working out?" "Just watching what I eat," he said, buttoning a shirt that would have been tight a year ago but now fit perfectly. "Getting older, you know. Gotta take care of yourself." He started buying new clothes, younger-looking clothes. He'd always been a flannel shirt and Wrangler jeans guy, but suddenly he was coming home with polo shirts from Macy's, with dark wash jeans that actually fit well, with a leather jacket that made him look like someone from a cologne commercial. Someone's having a midlife crisis. My book club friend Patty teased when she saw him picking me up from our Thursday meeting in his new jacket. But she said it affectionately, like it was cute. I laughed along. Better a new wardrobe than a new wife, right? The words came out of my mouth so easily, like a joke. Neither of us knew how close to the truth I was. The trips to Boise increased. By 2016, he was going down there almost every week. "I've got 3 big clients there now," he explained. "Custom furniture market is better down there than up here. I'm thinking of opening a small satellite workshop. Nothing major, just renting space where I can work on the bigger pieces locally instead of hauling everything back and forth." It made sense, good business sense. Expand into a new market. I supported it fully. "Whatever you think is best," I said. "You know the business." He'd leave Thursday morning, come back Saturday night or Sunday morning. Sometimes he wouldn't even come home on the weekends. "Big project deadline," he'd text. "Gonna work straight through. Home Monday." I'd spend those weekends alone, reading, working in the garden, having dinners with Patty or my sisters. I told myself this was what being married to a successful businessman looked like. Sacrifices had to be made. At least he wasn't traveling to Alaska or California. Boise was only 5 hours away. Manageable. But there were moments that nagged at me. Little things that didn't quite fit. Like the time I needed to use Rick's truck because my car was in the shop, and I found a child's toy in the back seat. A small plastic dinosaur, the kind you get in a Happy Meal. I held it in my hand, confused. We didn't have children. We didn't have grandchildren. None of our friends had young kids. Where had this come from? "Oh, that," Rick said when I asked him about it. "Must have been from Bob's grandson. He borrowed the truck last week to haul some lumber. Must have had the kid with him." Reasonable. Logical. I set the dinosaur on the kitchen counter, meaning to give it back to Bob, then forgot about a sit. It sat there for a month before Rick finally threw it away. Or the time I was looking for a particular recipe book I'd lent Rick. He liked to cook from my mother's old cookbooks. And I found a birthday card tucked into his nightstand drawer. The front had a picture of a sunset and the words, "Happy birthday to my husband." Inside, in looping feminine handwriting, it said, "Another year, another adventure. I love our life together. Forever yours, S. S. Who was S? My hands went cold holding that card. There was no date, no envelope. Just this card with its tender message from someone who called Rick her husband and signed with an initial. Rick came into the bedroom just then. "What are you looking for?" I held up the card, my voice coming out strange and tight. "This was in your nightstand. Who's S?" He looked at the card, and something flickered across his face. Then he laughed, actually laughed, and took the card from my hand. "Oh my God, that's from Sarah, Bob's wife. Remember 2 years ago, when Bob had that hernia surgery, right before his birthday? Sarah asked me to deliver his birthday card to the hospital, since I was going to visit him anyway. I guess I stuck it in the drawer and forgot about it." He showed me the card again, pointing to the generic "My husband" on the front. "See? It's just one of those pre-printed things. Happy birthday to my husband." She bought it for Bob. I felt stupid. Of course, it was for Bob. I was seeing conspiracies where none existed, turning innocent explanations into evidence of... What? What did I even suspect? An affair. Rick was 68 years old. We'd been married 18 years. If he was going to cheat, wouldn't he have done it when we were younger? Wouldn't there be more obvious signs? I apologized for being suspicious, told myself I was turning into one of those paranoid older women who saw threats everywhere. Rick was understanding, patient, gentle with me. "You've been stressed," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Maybe you're working too hard. When's the last time you took a vacation?" So we planned a vacation. Just a week, driving down the Oregon coast, staying in little bed and breakfasts, eating at local seafood restaurants. It was lovely. Rick was attentive, romantic even. We held hands walking on the beach. We drank wine on the balcony of our room overlooking the Pacific. We talked about my upcoming retirement, about selling the house maybe and buying something smaller, about all the travel we could do once I wasn't tied to the library's schedule. He was my husband. He loved me. Everything was fine. Except it wasn't. The breaking point came on a nothing day in October 2022. I was 67 years old, exactly 1 year away from my planned retirement. Rick was 69. We'd been married 24 years, and on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the entire foundation of my life cracked wide open. Rick had left for Boise on Thursday, as usual. Said he'd be back Sunday. Sunday came and went. He texted that he needed to stay through Monday to finish a china cabinet. Monday he texted again. Client wanted last-minute changes. He'd be home Tuesday. Normal. Routine. I didn't think anything of it. Tuesday morning I was at the library when I got a call from Spokane Valley Hospital. The emergency room. My heart seized immediately. Something had happened to Rick. "Mrs. Thompson," the voice said. "This is Nurse Bradley from the ER. Your husband, Richard Thompson, was brought in about 20 minutes ago. He's had a heart attack." The world tilted sideways. Is he okay?" "He's stable. We've got him in the cardiac unit. He's conscious. You should come down." I drove to the hospital in a blur, my hands shaking on the wheel, tears streaming down my face. 24 years of marriage. And I was about to lose him. All those little annoyances and suspicions seemed so petty now. All that mattered was that Rick was okay, that he survived, that I got more time with him. I parked crooked in the hospital lot and ran inside, following the signs to the cardiac unit on the 3rd floor. The nurse at the desk looked up when I burst through the doors. "Richard Thompson!" I gasped out. "His wife. I'm his wife," they called me. "He had a heart attack." The nurse's face did something strange, a flicker of confusion. then concern, then something that looked almost like pity. "Let me." "Just one moment, ma'am." She picked up the phone, spoke quietly into it. Another nurse appeared, an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair in a tight bun. She approached me carefully, like I was a skittish animal. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Charge Nurse Davidson. Can you come with me for a moment? I want to see my husband. Is he okay? They said he was stable." "He is stable, but there's a situation we need to discuss first. Come with me, please." She led me to a small consultation room, the kind they use to deliver bad news to families. My stomach dropped. He wasn't stable. They'd lied. He was dying, or brain damaged, or something horrible. "Please sit down," Nurse Davidson said gently. "Just tell me, is he going to die?" "No, his prognosis is good. The heart attack was mild, caught early. He'll need surgery, a stent placement, but he should make a full recovery." The relief was so intense I nearly sobbed. Thank God, thank God. "Can I see him now?" Nurse Davidson sat down across from me, her face full of that terrible pity again. "Mrs. Thompson, when Mr. Thompson was brought in, he was with a woman. She came in the ambulance with him. She's in the room with him now." I blinked, not understanding. "A woman? What woman? A neighbor? A client?" "She identified herself as his wife." The words didn't make sense. They were in English. I understood each individual word, but together they formed something incomprehensible. "What?" "No, I'm his wife. I'm Lorraine Thompson. We've been married 24 years. Nurse Davidson reached across the table and took my hand. "I know. We've confirmed your identity. The problem is, we've also confirmed hers. The woman with him is Sandra Thompson. She has a marriage license from Idaho, dated 1988. And she has 2 adult children with Mr. Thompson, both listed on hospital forms he filled out years ago as emergency contacts." The room spun. I heard a rushing sound in my ears like I was underwater. "That's impossible. He was married before, to Emily. She died. He told me she died." "I don't know who Emily is, ma'am, but Sandra Thompson has been married to Richard Thompson for 34 years. They have a home in Boise. She's been his primary emergency contact for every medical visit he's had at St. Luke's Regional down there." I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. This had to be a mistake, a computer error, someone else named Richard Thompson. But even as I thought it, I knew with a certainty that sank into my bones like ice water. The trips to Boise, the missing holidays, the phone calls, the text from Pete B., the birthday card from S., the child's toy in the truck, not Bob's grandson, but Rick's own grandchildren. 24 years of signs I'd ignored, rationalized, explained away. "I want to see him," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else's body. "I want to look him in the eye." "Mrs. Thompson, Lorraine, I don't think that's a good idea right now. He's just had a heart attack. The stress. I want to see my husband." Each word came out hard, cold, final. "Or should I say, our husband?" Nurse Davidson looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Let me see what I can do. Sandra's with him now. This is going to be very difficult for everyone." She left me in that tiny room. I sat there in shock, my mind trying to process the impossible. Rick had another wife. He'd had another wife the entire time we'd been married. Our wedding had been a lie. Our marriage certificate was fraudulent. Every "I love you," every anniversary, every shared meal and shared bed, all of it built on a foundation of lies. How many times had he left my bed on Thursday morning, driven 5 hours to Boise, and climbed into her bed Thursday night? How many times had he celebrated Christmas with her while I sat alone in Spokane, believing his excuses about emergency clients? How many times had he sat at her dinner table with their adult children, playing the devoted father and grandfather, then come home to me and played the devoted husband? I was going to be sick. I lurched toward the small trash can in the corner and vomited up my breakfast, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the can to hold it steady. Nurse Davidson came back in, saw me hunched over the trash can, and handed me a damp paper towel. Sandra has agreed to step out for a few minutes so you can see him. But Lorraine, please remember, he's just had a cardiac event. High stress could trigger another one. I wiped my mouth, straightened up. I won't kill him, though I should. She led me down the hallway. Through a window in one of the rooms, I saw a woman sitting in a chair, mid-60s, dark hair going silver, wearing a University of Boise sweatshirt. Our eyes met for just a second. She looked as devastated as I felt. Then Nurse Davidson opened a door, and there was Rick. He looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily, tracking the heart that had betrayed him just as thoroughly as he'd betrayed me. His face was gray, his eyes closed. The tough, capable woodworker who'd swept me off my feet at 43 now looked like what he was, a sick old man who'd lived a double life for 24 years. His eyes opened when he heard the door. He saw me, and I watched the color drain from his already gray face. He knew. He knew his secret was out. "Lorraine," he whispered hoarsely. "I can explain." I walked to the bedside. I looked down at this man I'd shared my life with, and I felt absolutely nothing. Not rage, not grief, not even hate. Just a vast, empty coldness, like I'd become a person-shaped hollow. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't you dare try to explain. I don't want to hear it. I don't want your excuses or your apologies or your justifications. I want you to know that the second you're out of this hospital, you're never seeing me again. Our marriage is over. It was never real anyway, was it? Please," he said, and tears started running down his face. Actual tears. Like he had the right to cry. Like he was the victim. "Please, Lorraine, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt you." "You never meant to hurt me," I repeated, my voice perfectly calm and perfectly cold. "You married me while already married to another woman. You lied to me every single day for 24 years. You took my money, my time, my life. You let me introduce you to my mother before she died. Let me tell everyone how lucky I was to have finally found love. And you never meant to hurt me? I love you," he sobbed. "I love both of you. I couldn't choose. I couldn't—" "You could have chosen not to be a lying bigamist. Piece of garbage," I said. "You could have chosen to be honest. You could have chosen to not waste nearly a quarter century of my life on a fraud." I turned toward the door. Behind me, Rick's monitors started beeping faster. Nurse Davidson stepped forward, checking the machines with concern. "I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow," I told Rick without looking back. "I'm getting copies of all our financial records. I'm going to find out exactly how much money you stole from me over the years. And then I'm going to take you for everything you have. Enjoy your recovery." I walked out of that room. I walked past Sandra, who was standing in the hallway, her face wet with tears, her hands shaking. I walked down the corridor, into the elevator, through the lobby, out to my car. Then I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda Accord, gripped the steering wheel, and screamed. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face that house. Our house. The place where I'd lived with a man who didn't actually exist. Instead, I drove to Patty's house. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "What happened? Is it Rick? Is he—" "He's alive," I said, and my voice sounded strange and flat. "He had a mild heart attack. He'll be fine. And he has another wife, in Boise. They've been married for 34 years. The entire time he was with me. He was with her." Patty's mouth fell open. For a moment, she just stared at me, unable to process it. Then she did what good friends do. She made me tea, wrapped me in a blanket, let me talk until 3 a.m. I told her everything, every sign I'd ignored, every rationalization, every moment I'd chosen to believe convenient lies because the truth was too terrible to consider. She listened without judgment, her face growing more horrified with each detail. "Oh, honey," she finally said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel like such an idiot," I whispered. "How could I not have known? How did I not see it?" "Because people like him are good at lying," Patty said fiercely. "Because you trusted him. Because you had no reason not to. This isn't your fault, Lorraine. None of this is your fault." But it felt like my fault. It felt like I should have been smarter, more suspicious, less trusting. It felt like I'd betrayed myself by being so willfully blind. I stayed at Patty's that night, lying awake in her guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through 24 years of memories. Every single one was now contaminated. Every moment of happiness, every expression of love, every shared experience, all of it corrupted by the knowledge that he was splitting himself in two, living parallel lives, lying to both of us, every single day. The next morning I called in sick to work. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Janet Morrison, a divorce attorney Patty had recommended who specialized in complex marital situations. I met with her that afternoon in her downtown office, bringing everything I could find: marriage certificate, financial records, bank statements, insurance documents. Janet listened to my story, taking notes, her expression growing harder with each detail. "This is bigamy," she said flatly. "He can be criminally prosecuted for this." "I don't want him prosecuted," I said, surprising myself. "I want my money back. I want what I'm owed, and then I want to never see him again." "The marriage isn't legal," Janet explained. "Since he was already married when he married you, your marriage is void, which means, technically, there's nothing to divorce. But we can sue him for fraud, for financial recompense, potentially for a portion of assets acquired during your time together." "He stole 24 years from me," I said. "What's the monetary value of 24 years? Janet's expression softened. "More than any court can award, unfortunately. But we'll get what we can." Over the next week, while Rick recovered in the hospital, still in Spokane, not transferred to Boise because the doctors wanted him stable before any long travel, Janet worked on building our case. I went back to that house only once, with Patty for support, to gather my personal belongings, clothes, books, photographs of my family. I left everything that reminded me of Rick, including our wedding album. I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Those photos of our smiling faces, our promises, our future we'd planned. I left it sitting on the bookshelf he'd built for me on our first anniversary. That beautiful oak piece with my initials carved in the back. Rick tried to call me. I blocked his number. He tried to email. I blocked that too. I had no interest in his explanations or his apologies. What could he possibly say that would make any of this better? But I did want answers to specific questions, not about why, I didn't care about his psychology or his justifications. I wanted practical information. How he'd pulled it off. How he'd managed 2 full lives without either woman knowing. That's when I decided to hire a detective. If Rick wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I found Marcus Webb through Janet's office. He was a private investigator who specialized in marital fraud cases. Apparently, I wasn't the first woman who'd discovered her husband had a secret life. We met at a coffee shop on the South Hill, both of us sitting in a corner booth away from the other customers. Marcus was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in the first 30 seconds. He had a way of listening that made you want to tell him things. Leaning forward slightly, maintaining eye contact, not interrupting. I told him the whole story again. By now I'd told it so many times it had started to feel like something that happened to someone else. Marcus took notes in a small leather-bound notebook, his handwriting neat and precise. "What exactly do you want to know?" he asked when I finished. "Everything," I said. "I want to know who Sandra is. I want to know about their marriage, their life together, their children. I want to know how he managed this. I want to know if there are any other secrets. Other women, other lies, other bank accounts I don't know about. I want to know the truth about every single thing he told me." Marcus nodded. "That's going to take some time, and it's not going to be cheap." "I don't care about the money," I said, and I didn't. I had my library pension, my savings, my salary. I was about to retire anyway. If I had to spend every penny to uncover the truth, it would be worth it. "How long?" "Give me 2 weeks for the basics, 4 to 6 weeks for the comprehensive report." "Start with the basics," I said. "I'll decide about the rest once I know more." We shook hands. He said he'd be in touch within 2 weeks. I went back to my temporary life at Patty's house, back to my job at the library, where I smiled and shelved books and helped patrons find information, all while my entire existence was unraveling. Rick was released from the hospital after 5 days. Sandra drove him back to Boise. I heard this through Janet, who was monitoring his movements, in case he tried to liquidate assets or flee the state. He went home to his other house, his other life, his real life, the one he'd had for 34 years, compared to the measly 24 he'd given me. The 2 weeks waiting for Marcus's report were the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept thinking about Sandra, wondering what she knew, what she'd been told, whether she was hurting as much as I was. We were both victims of the same man, bound together by his lies. Finally, Marcus called. "I have the preliminary report. Can you meet me this afternoon?" We met at the same coffee shop. He slid a manila folder across the table to me, thick with papers and photographs. My hands shook as I opened it. "The basics," Marcus said as I started reading. "Richard Thompson married Sandra Paulson in Boise, Idaho in 1988. He was 33, she was 26. They have 2 children, Michael, born 1989, and Jennifer, born 1992. Both are adults now with their own families. Michael has 2 kids. Jennifer has 1. Richard has been living in Boise in a house he and Sandra bought in 1995. He works as a furniture maker there, has a workshop in their garage, just like in Spokane. I stared at the photos. Sandra and Rick at someone's wedding, their arms around each other, both smiling. Rick with 2 young adults who had to be Michael and Jennifer, taken at what looked like a graduation. Rick holding a baby, one of his grandchildren. A whole life, documented in photographs, happening simultaneously with our life in Spokane. "When did he start the Spokane setup?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus flipped through some papers. He bought the Spokane house in 1997, about 6 months before he met you. Paid cash, withdrew a large sum from joint accounts he had with Sandra. Told her it was a business investment, a rental property he was going to fix up and flip. So he planned it, I said slowly. He bought the house, established a presence, created a whole backstory about moving from Seattle and Emily dying. All of it was premeditated. It appears so, yes. But why? Why would he do this? Why not just leave Sandra if he wasn't happy? Why create this elaborate, double life? Marcus leaned back in his chair. From what I've been able to piece together from talking to people who know him in both cities, and I've been discreet, nobody knows why I was asking, Richard Thompson is someone who likes to be liked. He likes to be needed. He enjoys playing the provider, the helpful husband, the reliable guy. And maybe one life wasn't enough for his ego. Maybe he got a thrill out of having 2 women who depended on him, who thought he was wonderful. I felt sick. So I was what? A hobby? A part-time adventure? You were a victim of a narcissist who wanted to have his cake and eat it too, Marcus said bluntly, and he probably would have kept it up indefinitely if his heart hadn't given out at the wrong time. I looked down at the folder, at all the documented proof of Rick's other life. What about money? Did he use my money for them? Some, yes. The financial analysis is in the back. He took money from your joint account regularly, claimed it was for business expenses, but actually used it to supplement his Boise household income. Over 24 years, we're estimating he diverted roughly $380,000 of your income to support his Idaho family. $380,000. My entire career, my retirement contributions, my savings, all funneled into maintaining his secret life. I wanted to throw up. There's more, Marcus said carefully. And this is going to be hard to hear. But Sandra didn't know about you either. She thought he was traveling for business when he came to Spokane. He told her he'd expanded into the Washington market, had a workshop space he rented there, clients he had to meet with regularly. She trusted him completely. So we're both idiots, I said bitterly. You're both normal people who trusted someone who presented himself as trustworthy. Marcus corrected. That doesn't make you idiots. That makes you human. I closed the folder, unable to look at the photos anymore. Is there anything else I need to know? Any other wives hidden somewhere? Not that I've found, and I've looked. Just the 2. But... He hesitated. I looked up. But what? There's a detail that might interest you, or might make things worse. I'm not sure which. Tell me. Sandra filed for divorce last week. She's not standing by him either. She's filing for fraud as well, claiming he used her money and credit to fund his Spokane life. She's just as angry as you are, just as betrayed. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me felt a strange kinship with Sandra. We were in the same boat, after all, both of us betrayed by the same man. But another part of me felt irrationally competitive, like I needed to prove I'd been hurt worse, that I deserved more sympathy, more recompense. Does she want to talk to me? I asked. I don't know. I haven't made contact with her directly, but if you want, I can facilitate a meeting. Did I want to meet the other Mrs. Thompson? Did I want to sit across from the woman who'd had Rick first, who'd borne his children, who'd had 10 more years of him than I did? What would we even say to each other? Let me think about it, I said. Marcus nodded, understanding. He slid another thin folder across the table. This is the preliminary financial analysis. You'll want to give this to your lawyer. There's enough here to build a solid civil case against him." I took both folders, paid Marcus for his work with a check that made my hand shake as I wrote it, and left the coffee shop. I sat in my car for a long time, those manila folders on the passenger seat next to me, full of truths I'd spent 24 years not knowing. Then I drove back to that house one more time. Let myself in with the key I still had. Walked through rooms that no longer felt like mine, if they ever really had been. Found the wedding album on the bookshelf where I'd left it. I took it outside to the backyard, to the fire pit we'd had installed 5 years ago. The one Rick said was for entertaining, but we'd barely ever used. I grabbed the lighter fluid from the garage, squirted it liberally over the album's white satin cover, struck a match, and let it fall. That's where I was, watching 24 years of lies go up in smoke, when Mrs. Chen looked over the fence and asked if everything was okay. Watching the flames consume that album felt like cauterizing a wound. It hurt, but it was necessary. Each photograph that blackened and curled felt like another lie being destroyed, another false memory being purged. The younger versions of Rick and me, so happy and hopeful, turning to ash. Good. Let them burn. Those people never really existed anyway. When the fire finally died down, leaving nothing but a charred lump of leather and melted photo paper, I went back inside one final time. I walked through the house systematically, opening drawers and cabinets, looking for anything else that might hold secrets. In the garage workshop, I found a lockbox hidden behind a shelf of wood stain cans. It wasn't locked. Rick probably never imagined I'd find it. Inside were documents. A second ID with Rick's photo, but a slightly different name. Richard T. Thompson, in Boise. Richard M. Thompson in Spokane. Insurance cards for both households. Bank statements for accounts I'd never known about. And letters. Love letters from Sandra, written over the years, tucked into envelopes with Boise postmarks, talking about missing him when he was traveling, expressing love and devotion and trust. I packed it all into a box and took it with me. Evidence, ammunition, proof of his systematic deception. That evening, sitting in Patty's guest room that had become my refuge, I finally broke down. Not gentle tears, but great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. Years of suppressed doubts and rationalized inconsistencies finally flooding out. Patty held me while I cried. Didn't try to say anything helpful. Just let me grieve for the life I thought I'd had. I wasted 24 years, I kept saying between sobs. 24 years I could have spent with someone real, someone honest. I'm 67 years old. I don't have 24 more years to waste. You didn't waste them, Patty said fiercely. He stole them. That's not the same thing. You lived your life in good faith. You did nothing wrong. But it felt wrong. It felt like I should have known, should have seen the signs earlier, should have been less trusting. How many women over the years had discovered their husbands' affairs within months or even weeks? And I'd gone 24 years without a clue. Except I had clues. Dozens of them. I'd just chosen not to see. The next day, I met with Janet and handed over everything Marcus had given me, plus the contents of the lockbox. She went through it all methodically, her expression growing grimmer with each document. "This is actually good for us," she said, which seemed like a perverse thing to say about evidence of your husband's bigamy. The dual identity documents, the separate accounts, the documentation of financial transfers. This all supports a fraud case. We can demonstrate pattern and intent. "How long until we go to court?" I asked. "Months, probably. These things take time. But, Lorraine, I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that we won't get everything you deserve. He'll have to split assets with Sandra, too, and there are legal limits to what we can claim. The house in Spokane is in his name only, so that'll be part of his assets to divide. Your contributions to the household over 24 years will be factored in, but proving emotional damages is tricky. I don't care about emotional damages, I said. I care about my stolen retirement money. I care about being compensated for 24 years of income he diverted to support his other family. We'll do our best, Janet promised. Waiting for the legal system to work was excruciating. Weeks turned into months. I moved from Patty's guest room into a small apartment downtown. Something temporary, while everything got sorted out. I kept working at the library, though I pushed my retirement date back. I needed the income and the structure. Needed something to fill my days besides rage and grief. People at work knew something had happened. I'd taken 2 weeks off immediately after the discovery, citing a family emergency, and came back quieter, harder, older. My colleagues were kind but didn't push. They probably thought Rick had died. In a way, he had. The Rick I knew had never existed. Through Janet, I learned that Rick was still in Boise, living with Sandra despite her divorce filing. They were apparently working out their own complicated situation. Part of me was furious that Sandra got to confront him daily, got to demand answers face to face, while I was here in Spokane with nothing but legal documents and second-hand information. Another part of me was relieved I didn't have to see him, didn't have to hear his justifications or his apologies. 4 months after the heart attack, Janet called with news. Sandra wants to meet with you. She's in Spokane for a deposition, and she asked if you'd be willing to have coffee. My first instinct was to say no. What was the point? We'd both been lied to. What could we possibly say to each other that would help? But curiosity won out. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location. A Starbucks near the courthouse. Public enough that we'd have to stay civil, but private enough to talk freely. I got there early, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and waited. I recognized Sandra the moment she walked in, even though I'd only seen her that once through the hospital window. She looked older now, tired, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a sweater. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd had the ground pulled out from under her. Our eyes met across the coffee shop. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. 2 women connected by the worst possible circumstance. Then she walked over and I stood up, and we faced each other awkwardly. "Lorraine," she said. Her voice was deeper than I expected, rougher. "Sandra." We sat down. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Sandra said, "I didn't know. I swear to God I had no idea you existed." "I didn't know about you either," I said. "He told me his first wife died." She laughed, a bitter sound. "He told me he traveled for business. For 34 years. I believed he traveled for business. I never questioned it, never doubted him." "Did you ever suspect? Were there signs?" Sandra nodded slowly. "Looking back, yes. Lots of them. But at the time I explained them all away. The missing holidays, the separate bank accounts he said were for business, the times he'd pull away when his phone rang. I trusted him completely." We sat there for a while comparing notes. It was almost absurd how similar our stories were. He'd used the same excuses with both of us, the same emotional manipulation, the same performance of devoted husband. We'd both been married to a man who didn't exist, who was playing a role in both our lives. "I hate him," Sandra said finally. "But I also hate myself for being so blind. 34 years, Lorraine. I gave him 34 years. 2 children, my whole adult life. And it was all built on lies. 24 years for me, I said. I met him when I was 43. I thought I was so lucky to find love at that age. I thought he was the best thing that ever happened to me. He destroyed us both, Sandra said quietly. And for what? Some kind of ego trip. Some need to prove he could fool everyone. I don't understand it. I'll never understand it. I realized I was crying. Sandra was crying too. And suddenly we weren't competitors or enemies or even strangers. We were two women who'd survived the same disaster, who understood each other in a way nobody else could. I'm sorry, I said, not even sure what I was apologizing for. I'm sorry too, Sandra replied. We talked for 2 more hours, about our lives, our children. She spoke lovingly about Michael and Jennifer, showed me photos of grandchildren whose existence I'd never known about, who'd played with toys that ended up in Rick's truck, leading to more lies. About our careers. She'd been a school teacher for 40 years before retiring. About our futures, uncertain and frightening, and completely different from what we'd planned. What are you going to do? I asked as we finally prepared to leave. Start over, I guess. I filed for divorce. I'm selling the house. Can't stand to live there anymore, knowing what it represented. I'll move somewhere smaller, somewhere that's just mine. Try to figure out who Sandra is when she's not Richard Thompson's wife. I nodded. That's what I'm trying to figure out too. Who Lorraine is. I've been defined by other people my whole life. My parents, my siblings, my job, Rick. I don't know who I am as just myself. Sandra squeezed my hand. Maybe we can both figure it out, separately, but knowing that someone else understands. We exchanged phone numbers. I didn't know if we'd actually stay in touch. Our connection was born from trauma, which isn't exactly a foundation for friendship. But there was something comforting about knowing she existed, that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. As I drove home from that meeting, something shifted in me. The rage I'd been carrying around like a backpack full of rocks started to lighten, just slightly. I was still furious at Rick, still hurt and betrayed and cheated. But I also felt a strange kind of clarity. He'd stolen years from me. Yes, but I was still here. I was still standing. And I had time left to live on my own terms. If you're still with me at this point in the story, I want you to know something. I see you there, watching this video. Maybe relating to parts of it. Maybe thinking about your own life, your own relationships, your own ignored warning signs. And I want to ask you something. If this story has moved you in any way, made you think, made you feel, made you want to share it with someone else who needs to hear it, would you take just a couple of seconds to help me out? Hit that like button. Seriously, it's right there below this video, and it takes literally 1 second of your time. But that one click tells YouTube's algorithm that this content matters, that real women's stories deserve to be heard, and it helps this video reach more people who might need it. And while you're down there, drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you've experienced something similar. Tell me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Your comments create community. They let other viewers know they're not alone. And honestly, they help me too. They remind me that sharing my pain has purpose, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Here's why it matters. Every subscription pushes me closer to my dream of dedicating full time to this channel. Right now, I'm building this from scratch, creating these videos in my spare time, pouring my heart into telling stories that matter The more subscribers I get, the more I can focus on bringing you even more stories, better production, deeper dives into topics that affect women our age. We're building something here. A community of women who refuse to be silent, who share their truths, who support each other, who know it's never too late to start over. Your support, your like, your comment, your subscription makes all of that possible. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now let me tell you about what happened next. The legal process dragged on for over a year. Depositions, document requests, negotiations, mediation attempts. Rick never showed up in person. Everything was handled through lawyers, which was probably better for everyone involved. Through Janet, I learned that his health had declined significantly after the heart attack. He'd aged rapidly, looked frail, needed help with daily activities. Part of me felt guilty about the stress I was causing him with the lawsuit. Then I'd remember the $380,000, the 24 stolen years, the casual way he'd split his life in two, and the guilt would evaporate. The hardest part wasn't the legal stuff, actually. It was rebuilding my sense of self. I'd been Rick's wife for so long that I didn't know how to be just Lorraine. Every decision I made, every plan I'd had for the future, all of it had involved Rick. Retirement was supposed to be us traveling together, buying that smaller house, spending time with his woodworking and my reading. Now I had to reimagine everything. I went to therapy. I'd never been to therapy before. My generation wasn't raised to talk about our feelings with strangers. But Janet recommended someone who specialized in betrayal trauma, and I figured I had nothing to lose. Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, turned out to be exactly what I needed. "You're grieving," she told me in our first session. Not just the loss of the relationship, but the loss of your own narrative. You thought you knew your life story, and now you have to revise the entire thing. That's profoundly disorienting. She was right. I'd wake up some mornings and for just a second, forget what had happened. I'd think about telling Rick something funny that happened at work, or planning what to make for his dinner, or wondering when he'd be home from Boise. Then reality would crash back in, and I'd have to remember all over again that my entire marriage had been a lie. Dr. Chen taught me to separate Rick's betrayal from my own worth. "His actions don't define you," she said repeatedly. "They define him. You were operating in good faith. You gave your trust to someone who presented himself as trustworthy. That's not a character flaw. That's being human." It took months before I started to believe that. Meanwhile, I stayed in touch with Sandra, surprisingly. We'd text occasionally, usually just checking in. "How are you doing?" "Rough day today, you?" "Yeah, same." We met for coffee a few more times when she was in Spokane for legal proceedings. Gradually, something like friendship formed. Not close friendship. We probably wouldn't have been friends under any other circumstances. But a connection born from shared trauma. She told me things about Rick I'd never known. He snored. He was allergic to shellfish. He'd wanted to be an architect, but his father pushed him into engineering. He had a terrible singing voice, but sang anyway. Usually old Beatles songs while working in his shop. Small human details that made him real in a way my version of him had never quite been. Did he actually love woodworking? I asked her once. Or was that part of the act too? It was real, Sandra said. That was one thing that was genuine. He really did love working with wood, creating things with his hands. He'd spend hours in the shop, completely absorbed. I used to think it was meditative for him. Now I realize it was probably just an excuse to avoid being fully present with either of us. The settlement came through in February 2024, 14 months after the heart attack that exposed everything. Rick was required to pay me restitution of $225,000, less than the $380,000 he'd stolen. But Janet said it was a good outcome, given the circumstances. He also had to pay Sandra a similar amount. Between us, we'd cleaned him out financially. He had to sell both houses, liquidate his retirement accounts, sell his equipment. Everything he'd built across 2 lives, gone. I felt no satisfaction in his financial ruin, no triumph, just tired relief that it was finally over. With my settlement money, plus my pension and savings, I had more financial security than I'd had in years. Ironic that being betrayed ended up improving my financial situation. But money couldn't give back the time, couldn't erase the humiliation, couldn't restore my faith in my own judgment. I retired from the library on my 68th birthday, March 2023, almost exactly a year before the settlement. My colleagues threw me a small party, gave me a card and a gift certificate to a bookstore. They all knew by then what had happened. Small workplace. People talk. But they were kind enough not to bring it up. Just wished me well. Told me I'd be missed. Asked me to stay in touch. I didn't know what to do with myself at first. Decades of having somewhere to be every day. And suddenly, nothing. No job. No husband. No clear purpose. Just endless empty time. Dr. Chen encouraged me to try new things. You've spent your whole life being what other people needed, she said. Now figure out what you need, what you want. Not for anyone else, for yourself. So I tried things. I took a watercolor painting class at the community center and discovered I had no talent for it whatsoever, but it was fun anyway. I joined a hiking group for seniors and started spending weekends exploring trails around Spokane with a group of women around my age. I volunteered at the women's shelter, helping women who were leaving abusive relationships. My betrayal trauma somehow made me more understanding of their situations, and I started writing. Just journaling at first, trying to process everything that had happened. But then I started writing down my story in more detail, adding observations about the warning signs I'd missed, lessons I'd learned, advice I'd give my younger self. A friend from my book club suggested I start a blog. I thought she was crazy. Who'd want to read about an old woman's failed marriage? But I set one up anyway, more for my own catharsis than anything else. I called it Starting Over at 68. The first post I published was about the day I found out about Sandra. Raw, honest, painful. I expected maybe 5 people to read it, mostly friends being supportive. It got 3,000 views in the first week. Women started commenting, sharing their own stories of betrayal, thanking me for making them feel less alone. I kept writing about the warning signs I'd ignored, about the process of healing, about learning to trust myself again, about the absurdity of starting completely over in your late 60s. The blog grew. Within 6 months, I was getting tens of thousands of views per post. Women from all over the country, all over the world actually, were reading my story and seeing themselves in it. They'd message me privately, telling me about their own situations, asking for advice, thanking me for giving them courage to leave or to demand better or to simply keep living. I realized I'd found my purpose, not the one I'd planned. I was supposed to be traveling with Rick, enjoying quiet retirement, maybe doing some light volunteering. Instead, I was running a blog that helped women who'd been betrayed, writing articles about red flags and self-trust, connecting with hundreds of women who understood what I'd been through. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was mine. Completely, authentically mine. I want to pause here and talk to you directly for a moment, Because we're nearing the end of this story and I need you to know something important. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. I know it's been a long video, over an hour of my voice telling you about the worst, and then the best chapters of my life. You've stayed with me through the betrayal, the discovery, the aftermath, and now the rebuilding. That means something, and I need to ask you for something. Not for me, really. For the community we're building together. If this story resonated with you, if any part of it made you think or feel or see your own life differently, would you hit that like button? I know I've asked before, but if you didn't do it then, please do it now. That like is powerful. It tells YouTube that this content matters, that real women's stories deserve visibility, that age and experience have value. One click from you could push this video to someone who desperately needs to hear it. And please, subscribe to this channel. Ring that notification bell. Here's what you need to understand. I'm building this completely from scratch. Every video is hours of work, writing, recording, editing, pouring my heart out for strangers who might need to hear what I learned the hard way. But I can only do this if enough people support it. Your subscription is a vote that says, these stories matter. Women over 55 matter. Learning from each other's pain and triumph matters. The more subscribers I get, the more time I can dedicate to this. The more stories I can share, the more women we can reach. And comment. Please comment. Tell me what city or country you're watching from. Tell me what part of the story hit you hardest. Tell me if you've experienced something similar. Your comments do two things. They boost the video in the algorithm, and they create community. When another woman reads your comment about surviving betrayal or starting over or refusing to give up, she feels less alone. We're building something powerful here. A network of women who won't be silenced, who won't settle, who know it's never too late to rewrite their stories. Every like, every subscription, every comment brings us closer to making this channel something sustainable, something that can keep helping women for years to come. Your support literally makes that possible. Thank you. Now let me finish this story. It's been almost 3 years since that heart attack revealed everything. 3 years since I watched my wedding album burn in my backyard. 3 years since my entire understanding of my life changed in a hospital waiting room. Rick died last spring. Heart failure, Sandra told me in a brief text. I felt nothing when I read it. Not relief, not sadness, not even satisfaction that he'd faced consequences for his actions. Just nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my life, a character in someone else's story, not mine. I didn't go to his funeral. Sandra did. She'd stayed connected to him in some complicated way I never fully understood. Maybe because they shared children and grandchildren. Maybe because 34 years couldn't be erased even by the worst betrayal. She sent me photos afterward, showing me he'd been buried in Boise, that Michael and Jennifer had given eulogies talking about their father's complicated life, his flaws, but also his genuine love for them. Good for them, I thought. They got a real father, even if he was flawed. I got a phantom. I still live in Spokane, in a small 2-bedroom condo I bought with part of my settlement money. It's cozy, affordable, completely mine. No memories of Rick here. I decorated it exactly how I want. Lots of bookshelves, a comfortable reading chair by the window, walls painted colors he would have hated, but I love. I'm 70 years old now. I have friends. Real friends. Ones I've made through my hiking group and through the blog and through life just happening. I have purposes. The blog, my volunteering. A book I'm working on about recognizing manipulation in relationships. I have plans. I'm thinking about traveling next year. Maybe taking that trip to Ireland I always wanted to take, but Rick was never interested in. I have peace, not perfect peace. Some days I still feel angry about the stolen years. Some days I mourn the life I thought I'd have. Some days I feel cheated out of the chance to grow old with someone who genuinely loved me. But most days, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm content with who I've become, proud of how I've rebuilt, grateful for the unexpected ways my life has unfolded. The blog continues to grow. Last month I hit 500,000 views. 500,000 women reading my story, recognizing pieces of their own lives in it, finding courage or validation or just the knowledge that they're not alone. I get messages constantly from women thanking me, telling me I helped them leave a bad situation, or demand better treatment, or simply keep going when they wanted to give up. That's worth more than the 24 years Rick stole. It's worth more than any amount of settlement money. Knowing that my pain has purpose, that my hard-earned wisdom helps others, that's a kind of peace I never expected to find. Sandra and I still talk occasionally. She remarried last year, a widower she met at her book club, someone who knows her whole story and loves her anyway. I'm genuinely happy for her. She deserves that second chance at a real relationship. As for me, I'm not looking for romance. I'm 68 years old, and I like my life exactly how it is. Quiet, independent mine. Maybe someday someone will come along who's worthy of sharing it. Maybe not. Either way, I'll be fine. Because here's what I learned from all of this. You can survive the worst betrayal imaginable. You can rebuild from ruins. You can find purpose in pain. You can start over at any age. You're not too old, not too damaged, not too tired. You're exactly who you're supposed to be, at exactly the right time. It's never too late to burn the lies and build a truth. So that's my story. From the wedding album burning in my backyard to where I am now. Alive, thriving, genuinely okay. It's not the story I thought I'd tell. I thought I'd be talking about retirement travels with my husband, about grandchildren and quiet golden years. Instead, I'm talking about bigamy and betrayal and starting completely over in my late 60s. But you know what? This story's better. It's more real. It's mine. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't rationalize away your doubts. Don't make excuses for inexplicable behavior. Don't sacrifice your peace for someone else's convenience. And if you do find yourself betrayed, devastated, starting over when you thought you were settled, you can survive it. You can more than survive it. You can thrive. You can build something beautiful from the ashes. You just have to decide that your story isn't over, that the worst thing that happened to you doesn't get to be the last thing. It's never too late to hire that detective, literally or metaphorically. It's never too late to demand the truth. It's never too late to burn what needs burning and plant something new in the ashes. I'm Lorraine Miller. I took my maiden name back, dropped Thompson like the lie it always was. And I'm 70 years old, and finally, genuinely happy. Not because I found perfect love or perfect peace, but because I found myself. And that's worth more than any wedding album that burned in a backyard fire pit on a Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and capable of more than you imagine. Take care of yourselves and each other.